Waking up every single morning for 2 months to this. A massive food truck, bigger than a city bus, parked right across my driveway. Engine roaring, burnt grease smoke pouring straight into my open bedroom window. Before the sun's even up, I'd walk out, polite as hell.
Hey, can you move it? I'm blocked in.
She'd flash that fake sweet smile.
Just a minute, hon.
Then ignore me completely while serving her line of customers. Every single day. And get this, she wasn't some random vendor. She was the HOA president. The same woman who fined me $100 for a slightly crooked mailbox. The queen of follow the rules. Except when it was her greasy moneymaker blocking my own damn driveway. She had no idea what was coming. What would you have done on day one? Drop your city and your revenge idea in the comments. Let's see who wins this round. Before we get into the full circus, you need to understand where I'm standing, literally and figuratively. My name's Garrett Holloway. I'm a retired electrician, 53 years old, and for the last 11 years I've lived at 412 Blackwood Lane in the Creekside Pines subdivision, a quiet little corner of Raleigh, North Carolina, where the lots are generous, the oak trees are ancient, and the deed restrictions are, unfortunately, the source of more neighborhood drama than any reality TV show deserves. I bought my house the hard way. Worked overtime for 3 straight years, saved every dollar my late wife Carolyn and I could squeeze out of the budget, and finally put down roots on a corner lot that had a long, sloping driveway I genuinely loved, because it meant my truck and my old boat trailer both had a legal home. No street parking necessary. That driveway was practical real estate. Carolyn passed in 2019, breast cancer. She loved that house, loved the smell of pine needles on the front walk in November, loved how the morning light hit the kitchen windows just so. After she died, that house became something more than property. It became the last place her handprints were still on the walls, metaphorically speaking. Keeping it the way she'd want it, that wasn't stubbornness. That was love. So when the Creekside Pines HOA started flexing its muscles, I took it personally. The Homeowners Association had been a normal, functional, forgettable thing for most of my time on Blackwood Lane. Bake sales, speed bumps, the occasional argument about fence height. Nothing criminal. Then, about 2 years ago, a woman named Donna Platt got herself elected HOA president. And the temperature in the neighborhood changed the way it does before a bad storm. Slowly, then all at once. Donna was, to put it diplomatically, a force of personality. Late 40s, sharp bob haircut, the kind of pressed khakis that suggested she'd never once dripped anything on herself. She drove a white Escalade and moved through neighborhood common areas with the energy of a building inspector who'd been personally wronged by architecture. She had a way of smiling at you while saying something cutting that left you standing in your own driveway wondering what just happened. She also owned a food truck. Donna's Delights. Breakfast sandwiches, pastries, coffee, theoretically targeting the morning crowd near the subdivision entrance before people filtered out to work. And for a while, she parked it overnight at the commercial lot over on Timber Ridge Road, which was fine. That was the arrangement. That made sense. Then she decided that Timber Ridge Road was too far to walk in the morning to prep. Never mind that it was literally 8 minutes by car. And so, one Tuesday in early September, Donna's Delights materialized in front of my driveway at 5:47 a.m., idling. The first knock on my door came before my alarm. She was there on my porch, chipper as a morning radio host, explaining that she was just using the curb space temporarily and that she'd be moving by 7. Her tone had that particular warmth that actually means, don't push me on this. I told her, politely, that blocking a driveway, even partially, was a violation of Raleigh City Ordinance. She smiled, tilted her head. Oh, Garrett, I don't think you need to worry about that. It's a public street. She'll be gone by 7. She wasn't gone by 7. She was gone by 7:40, and she was back the next morning at 5:50. What Donna understood, or thought she understood, was that she was the HOA president. She had leverage. She had allies on the board. She had the ability to make my life difficult in a dozen low-grade, hard-to-prove ways if I made noise. She'd already sent me 2 HOA violation letters that year for a weather-worn fence board and unapproved mailbox hardware. Both were retaliatory, both were petty, and both had cost me afternoons of paperwork to dispute. What she did not understand, not yet, was that I'm an electrician, And electricians don't get rattled by systems that look complicated from the outside. We trace the wire back to the source. We find the short, and then we fix it. I just needed to find the wire. Here's the thing about a food truck parked in front of your driveway. It's not just inconvenient. It's a whole sensory experience you never asked for. By day 3, I had memorized the rhythm of the diesel engine, cycling on at 5:45 a.m., a low, rolling rumble that came up through the floorboards like the house itself was complaining. Then the generator would kick in with a higher whine. And if the wind was right, you'd get the smell of propane and old grease drifting through the bedroom window, the crunch of gravel under the stabilizer jacks, the metallic clang of the service window unlatching, all before 6 in the morning, every single day. I called Raleigh City Code Enforcement on day 4, filed it online, attached the photo I'd taken on day 1 showing the front bumper of Donna's truck overlapping the edge of my driveway apron by about 2 feet. The ordinance is clear. No vehicle may be parked so as to obstruct ingress or egress to a private driveway. Penalty: fine plus tow at owner's expense. The code enforcement officer, a weary-looking man named Supervisor Tennyson, based on the email signature, informed me that they'd look into it. And they did look into it. They came by, looked at the truck, took a photo, and left a notice on the windshield. Donna moved the truck 6 inches. I'm not joking. 6 inches. The bumper was now technically not over the driveway apron. It was kissing the property line in a way that was clearly deliberate and clearly defiant. She wasn't just parking there anymore. She was making a point. She made another point the following Monday, when she sent me an HOA violation notice for improperly stored equipment. The equipment in question was my boat trailer, which had been legally on my own driveway, in the same spot, for 9 years. But according to a new HOA rule, a rule that had been quietly amended at a board meeting I hadn't been informed of, trailers over a certain length now required HOA approval for driveway storage. You see the pattern. This is how petty authority actually works, not through outright confrontation, but through a death by 1,000 rule letters. Make someone's life complicated enough that they give up. Donna was banking on that. I didn't give up. I got a surveyor. A licensed property surveyor costs money, but it is some of the best money you can spend in a neighbor dispute. Mine, a meticulous guy named Bert, came out on a Thursday morning and spent 4 hours with stakes and spray paint mapping every inch of my property line, the public right-of-way, and the street edge. His report, stamped, signed, professionally sealed, confirmed something very useful. The section of curb Donna was using sat within the city's right-of-way easement, meaning the street there was not purely public parking. It was subject to driveway access protection. More importantly, Bert's survey showed that when Donna's truck was at its moved 6 inches position, the vehicle's right side mirror extended over the visual clearance line required by NC General Statute 136-93, the one that says no obstruction may impair driver visibility when exiting a private drive. That was a different violation, a bigger one. I refiled with code enforcement. This time, I attached Bert's survey, a photograph with the mirror overlap circled in red, and a citation to the specific state statute. I also, and this is important, filed a separate complaint with the NCDOT local district office, because a sightline obstruction on a state-maintained road is their jurisdiction, not just the city's. 2 agencies, 2 complaints, 1 truck. Donna found out about the DOT filing through someone in the neighborhood. I won't speculate who talked, but Creekside Pines has the gossip infrastructure of a small-town diner. She appeared at my door that Saturday afternoon, Escalade parked halfway on the curb, as if to make a statement, arms crossed. You filed with the DOT? Are you serious right now? I filed documentation of a sightline obstruction with the appropriate state agency. Yes. She stared at me like I'd just rearranged her furniture. This is a neighborhood, Garrett. You don't call the state on your neighbors. I call the appropriate authorities when safety regulations are violated. That's not personal, Donna. That's just how rules work. She left. But I noticed, 2 days later, that the HOA violation notice about my boat trailer was quietly withdrawn. No explanation. Just gone from the online portal. Small win. But small wins teach you what the opponent values. And what Donna valued, above everything else, was her reputation. That was the wire I needed to find. A property survey is legally admissible in civil and code enforcement proceedings. Get one done, keep the stamped copy, and file it with the city as supporting documentation for your complaint. It transforms a neighbor dispute into an evidence-backed formal complaint. The first tow happened on a Wednesday, tow number 1 of 18. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't standing at my front window at 7:15 a.m. watching it happen. Of course I was. I had my coffee, the real stuff, percolator, not the watery brown water Donna was apparently selling for $4 a cup out of her service window. I watched the flatbed from Ace Recovery pull up, watched the operator run the paperwork, watched Donna's delights rise off the asphalt on the hydraulic lift and get carried away down Blackwood Lane, like a very large, very obnoxious parade float. The smell of diesel lingered for another 20 minutes. Then the street was quiet for the first time in 2.5 weeks, and I could hear the birds again. Donna showed up to retrieve the truck later that morning. The impound fee for a commercial vehicle in Wake County is not trivial. It was around $480, plus the daily storage fee if she left it overnight. She paid it, and the next morning, the truck was back. This is, I will admit, where a reasonable person might wonder, why is she doing this? She's paying almost $500 per tow. That's not a sound financial decision for a food truck operation. The answer, I gradually realized, was that this wasn't really about the parking spot anymore. It was about whether Donna Platt would let a retired electrician on Blackwood Lane tell her what she could and couldn't do. In her mind, backing down was losing, and Donna did not lose. She just kept parking there, and I kept calling. Tow number 2 was a Friday, number 3 the following Tuesday. On tow number 4, something shifted in the neighborhood. People noticed. The other residents of Creekside Pines weren't entirely in the dark about what was happening. Like I said, gossip travels fast here, but seeing the truck literally hauled away again prompted conversations I hadn't expected. My neighbor across the street, a retired high school principal named Warren, stopped me by my mailbox. "I saw the truck went again," he said. "Yep." "She send you any more violation notices?" "2 this week, both on things that have been the way they are for years." Warren nodded slowly, the way someone does when they're confirming something they already suspected. "She did the same thing to the Delacroix family on Elm Court, before they moved." He paused. "Before they felt like they had to move." That stopped me cold. The Delacroix family. I knew the name, had met them briefly at a block association event years ago, were the only black family in the Elm Court cul-de-sac. They'd been in the neighborhood for 4 years before selling suddenly, somewhat quietly, about 18 months prior. I'd assumed it was a job relocation. Warren's implication was something more deliberate. I want to be careful here, because I'm not in the business of making accusations I can't document. But what Warren told me, and what he later put in writing, was that the Delacroix family had received an unprecedented number of HOA violation notices during their residence, many of which targeted items that were not cited for other homeowners. That during board meetings, comments were made about maintaining neighborhood standards that felt pointed in ways that were hard to pin down but impossible to ignore. And that after they moved, the violation notices for their section of Elm Court essentially stopped. Donna's petty power suddenly had a more specific shape, and that changed the calculus for me considerably. I started keeping a proper paper trail, not just for myself, a detailed log with timestamps, photos, amounts paid to code enforcement, tow receipts, every HOA violation I received, and every response I filed. I also started reaching out quietly to other homeowners to ask, carefully and specifically, whether they'd experienced disproportionate enforcement under Donna's tenure. The pattern I found was troubling. 6 households, not all of them minority-owned, but disproportionately so, had received significantly higher rates of violation notices than their immediate neighbors for comparable or lesser infractions. 2 had sold and moved away. 1 was currently in the middle of a dispute. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a civil rights investigator, but I knew how to read a ledger, and this ledger had a pattern in it. Selective enforcement by an HOA, applying rules differently based on race, national origin, or familial status, violates the Fair Housing Act, 42 U.S.C. Section 3604. Documentation of the disparity across multiple households is the foundation of a HUD complaint. You don't need an attorney to file the initial complaint at hud.gov/fairhousing. Tow number 5 happened on a Thursday. I barely registered it. My mind was somewhere else entirely. By tow number 7, Donna escalated. She started holding emergency HOA board meetings, with 4-hour notice, the minimum allowed under the Creekside Pines bylaws, and pushing through rule amendments specifically calibrated to make my life difficult. A new restriction on exterior contractor vehicles that would have prohibited my electrician colleague from parking in my driveway during the kitchen renovation I had scheduled. A new policy requiring residents to get board approval before filing complaints with external government agencies, which was so obviously unconstitutional that even her own vice president voted against it. But the one she almost got through, a bylaw amendment that would have created a neighborhood aesthetics corridor along Blackwood Lane, specifically the block I lived on, that would prohibit any vehicle wider than 7 feet from being parked within 50 feet of a residential driveway. Donna's Delights was 6 feet 10 inches wide. She'd measured her own truck. I'll give her points for preparation. The amendment was scheduled for a vote at the October regular meeting. I had 2 weeks. Here's the thing about HOA bylaws that most people don't understand until they need to. They're not unchangeable gospel. They're contract law, governed by state nonprofit corporation statutes, and they have procedural requirements that are binding. In North Carolina, the Planned Community Act, NCGS Chapter 47F, requires that any bylaw amendment affecting use of individual lots must have written notice to all homeowners at least 10 days before a vote, specifying the proposed change in full. Donna sent a vague 2-paragraph summary, not the full text, not the amendment language. I contacted an HOA attorney, not to retain full representation, just for a 1-hour consultation that cost me $150 and was worth every cent. She confirmed that the notice was procedurally deficient. If the board voted on the amendment as noticed, the vote would be challengeable and likely voidable in court. So at the October meeting, I showed up. I brought my notes. I brought a printed copy of Chapter 47F, and I brought Warren, who had been on the original HOA founding committee 15 years ago and remembered exactly what the procedural requirements were supposed to be. The meeting was in the community center on Pinecrest Circle, a beige carpeted room that smelled of stale coffee and unresolved grievances. About 30 residents showed up, which was more than usual because word had gotten around that something was going to happen. Donna called the room to order with practiced efficiency. She moved through the agenda quickly: budget reports, landscaping contract renewal, and then got to new business, item 3, the aesthetics corridor amendment. Before we vote, I said, standing up, I want to raise a procedural concern. The room got very quiet, in that way rooms do when people sense something real is about to happen. Donna's expression didn't change, but she gripped the edge of the podium. I walked through it, clearly without drama. The notice requirement, the specific statutory language, the fact that the notice distributed hadn't included the full amendment text. I cited the statute number. I handed my copy to the board secretary, who looked at Donna. Donna said the notice was substantially compliant. Warren stood up next to me. Donna, I helped write these bylaws. The notice requirements aren't suggestions. Voting on an improperly noticed amendment exposes the board, personally, to liability. I'd suggest tabling this until proper notice can be issued. A board member named Suzette, who I later learned had been having her own quiet frustrations with Donna's management style, seconded the table motion before Donna could object. It passed 5-2. After the meeting, in the parking lot, Donna appeared at my car window as I was unlocking it. She'd shed the public composure. Her jaw was tight. "You think you're being clever," she said, not a question. "I think I'm following the rules," which I was under the impression was the thing we all agreed to when we moved in here. She stared at me for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "You're going to regret making this a fight." I got in my car, drove home, and called my attorney contact to let her know things were going to get worse before they got better. They did. Under North Carolina's Planned Community Act, NCGS Section 47F-3-106, HOA bylaw amendments require specific procedural notice with the full text of the proposed change. A defective notice renders any resulting vote voidable. Always pull the statute for your state before walking into a board meeting. It is publicly available and free. Tow number 8 happened on a Monday. I know the exact number because I kept a ledger. A proper, dated, line item ledger in a spiral notebook, the kind I used to use on job sites for punch lists. Date, time parked, time tow called, time tow arrived, fee amount from the impound lot's public rate schedule, cumulative total. By tow 8, Donna had paid approximately $3,800 to retrieve her truck. I found that number oddly satisfying to write down. But numbers are a funny thing. They lead you places you didn't expect. While I was doing the math on Donna's towing expenditure, I got curious about something else. How was a woman who owned a single food truck and an HOA presidency affording an Escalade, an upscale kitchen renovation I'd heard about through Warren, and the legal consultation she was clearly getting to navigate the bylaw fight? The food truck business, whatever its gross, couldn't be doing that well. I started paying attention to public records. This is something most people don't realize. An enormous amount of financial information is publicly available if you know where to look and are patient enough to look. The Wake County Register of Deeds is searchable online. Property records, deed of trust records, lien records. I'm not a private investigator, and I wasn't trying to be. I was just a curious man with a library card and too much time on his hands since retirement. What I found was this. There was a deed of trust on Donna's home in favor of First Piedmont Lending for $127,000, recorded 18 months ago. Standard enough. Refinance, probably. But there was a second instrument recorded 6 months after that. A mechanic's lien filed by a commercial kitchen contractor for $22,400 in unpaid work on the food truck build-out. The lien was still active. It had never been released. Then I found a small business judgment from Wake County District Court, 17 months old, in favor of a food truck supply company for $8,100. Unpaid invoices. Donna's Delights was not, financially speaking, delightful. It was a struggling business with serious liabilities, and Donna was using the truck, which she needed to generate income, to park in front of my driveway as a power play. Every tow fee came directly out of a business that was already bleeding. But here's where it got really interesting. I dug into the HOA's financials, which are, under North Carolina law, available to any homeowner upon written request within 10 business days. What I received, after a formal written request, was a set of accounts that showed something peculiar. The HOA's operating account had an unexplained $14,200 transfer to a vendor listed only as D&P Consulting Services over the prior fiscal year. No contract on file. No minutes reflecting board approval of the expenditure. I ran the business name. D&P Consulting Services was a sole proprietorship registered in North Carolina. The registered agent? Donna Platt. She was paying herself from HOA funds, under a consulting disguise, without board authorization. That wasn't just petty. That was potentially criminal. Specifically, it fit the definition of embezzlement under NCGS Section 14-90, misappropriation of property by someone entrusted with it in a fiduciary capacity. I closed my laptop, sat with it for a while, listened to the quiet street outside where, for once, there was no diesel rumble. Then I picked up the phone and called Warren. HOA financial records, including budgets, expenditures, and vendor contracts, are legally available to any member homeowner upon written request in most states. Unauthorized payments from HOA funds by a board officer may constitute embezzlement under state law. File a written records request first. If the board refuses, you can compel disclosure through the court. Let me be honest about the planning phase, because I don't want it to sound more dramatic than it was. This wasn't a heist. There were no whiteboards with red strings connecting index cards. It was a retired guy, a retired principal, a HOA attorney consultant, and eventually a very calm CPA named Roland, who specialized in nonprofit governance, sitting around Warren's kitchen table with printed records and a lot of coffee, working through a checklist. The coffee was good, for the record. Warren had one of those pour-over setups. The whole kitchen smelled like dark roast and serious purpose. We built the strategy in layers, and each layer had a specific legal and practical function. The first layer was documentation, everything I'd already compiled. The tow log, the survey, the DOT and code enforcement filings, the HOA violation letters, and my responses got organized into a proper folder, indexed, and copied. 3 physical copies, 1 cloud backup. Because in my experience, the moment you need a document is the moment it's most likely to have gone somewhere inconvenient. The second layer was the HUD complaint. I drafted it carefully, over 3 evenings, following the format on the HUD website exactly. It named Donna Platt as HOA president, documented the pattern of selective enforcement across 6 households, and cited the specific conduct, the violation letters, the comparative data on enforcement frequency, Warren's statement about the Delacroix family, as the evidentiary basis. I had the attorney review the draft before filing. She made 2 small suggestions and told me the foundation was solid. DIY, legal strategy note. HUD fair housing complaints are filed online at HUD.gov. They're free to file, and HUD will investigate without you needing to retain private counsel. The complaint triggers a formal response obligation from the named party. The third layer was the financial irregularity. Roland the CPA went through the HOA records I'd obtained and prepared a formal audit memorandum, not a full audit, which would require board authorization, but a professional written analysis of the unexplained vendor payments and what proper governance would have required. His conclusion? The payments to D&P Consulting lacked the board approval required by both the HOA's own bylaws and North Carolina nonprofit law. He recommended referral to the State Attorney General's office, which has a nonprofit fraud division. I want to pause here and acknowledge something. None of us wanted to see Donna arrested. That's not a comfortable thing to want. What we wanted was accountability, the kind that stops the behavior permanently, protects the homeowners who'd been harmed, and ensures the HOA gets run properly going forward. The physical trap was actually the simplest piece, and in some ways the most satisfying to design. My corner lot has a particularly useful feature. It's visible from 4 directions, and I had security cameras, 4 of them, installed after a rash of mailbox vandalism 3 years prior, that covered the driveway apron, the curb, and the street in both directions. Good resolution, timestamps, cloud storage. Donna had been performing in front of those cameras for weeks without realizing I had 30+ days of footage already. What I added was a physical marker. On the advice of Bert the surveyor, I installed a set of driveway entry posts, the retractable kind, used in commercial lots, that you can pop up and down, at the edge of my driveway apron where it met the public right-of-way. These are legal. They're on my property. They don't block the street, but they make it visually and physically unambiguous where my driveway access zone begins. The first morning Donna pulled up, saw the posts, and decided to park close enough that the truck's mirror was over the posts. That was an additional documentation point. The second morning she did it, that footage went directly into the municipal code enforcement complaint. The fourth layer, and the one I was most nervous about, was the public timing. Roland, Warren, my HOA attorney, and I agreed that the financial evidence needed to be presented at an HOA meeting, on the record, with homeowners present, not leaked to gossip, not a private confrontation, a formal, documented public disclosure. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for the 2nd Saturday of November, 5 weeks away. We had time to be thorough. In the meantime, the tows kept coming. 9, 10, 11. Donna kept paying to get her truck back. At a certain point, I think the retrieval had become a ritual for her, a way of asserting she hadn't been beaten. Every morning the truck came back was, in her mind, a win. What she didn't know was that we'd already won. We were just waiting for the right moment to let her find out. 2 weeks before the annual meeting, Donna tried 3 things in rapid succession, which told me she was either getting information from somewhere, or she was simply panicking. Maybe both. Thing 1. She sent a certified letter to every homeowner in Creekside Pines, all 87 of them, with a 4-page document titled, "A Message from Your HOA President About Community Safety and Activist Harassment." The letter described my code enforcement filings as weaponizing city bureaucracy against a small business owner. It referenced my surveyor's involvement as paid outside interference, and it characterized the upcoming annual meeting as being at risk of being disrupted by a small faction seeking to destabilize our community. It was, objectively, a masterpiece of framing. If you didn't know the facts, it almost sounded reasonable. The smell of it, that particular stink of narrative manipulation dressed up in community concern language, was something I recognized from contractors who've overcharged clients and then blamed the client for the dispute. Several neighbors called me after receiving the letter. Most were skeptical. A few were genuinely confused. One, a woman on Brookside whose name I'll leave out, called to say she thought Donna made some fair points and that I should try to find a compromise. I thanked her for the call. I did not explain that the compromise I was seeking was, please stop parking in front of my driveway and also stop embezzling HOA funds. Some negotiations are not amenable to middle ground. Thing 2. Donna went to the press. She contacted the local Raleigh community blog, one of those neighborhood news sites that runs on tips and mild controversy, and gave an interview in which she described herself as a food truck entrepreneur being targeted by a neighbor who wants to eliminate small business from residential communities. She did not mention the towing. She did not mention the survey. She did not mention the HOA violations she'd sent me. The blog ran it. It got about 200 shares. For 3 days, a handful of strangers on the internet were angry at me specifically. I did not respond publicly. This was a deliberate choice. When someone is building a public narrative, engaging directly with it on their terms is almost always a mistake. You amplify the story, you look defensive, and you give them the reaction they want. I drafted a brief, factual statement, had my attorney review it, and held it in reserve. If the media attention escalated, I'd release it. Otherwise, silence was the correct move. Thing 3, and this was the one that genuinely surprised me, was the bribery attempt. I don't use that word lightly. What happened was this. Donna's adult son, a man in his late 20s named Cliff, knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening. He was polite, apologetic in a practiced way. He asked if we could talk. I let him onto the porch, but not inside. He said his mother was under a lot of stress. He said the food truck was their family's primary income right now, and things were tight. He said that if I would consider dropping the code enforcement complaints and not bringing anything up at the annual meeting, his mother would make it right, his phrase, by covering 6 months of my HOA dues. HOA dues at Creekside Pines run $175 a month. 6 months was $1,050. I stood there on my own porch, in the cool November air, and looked at this young man who was clearly doing his best to fix a situation he'd been sent to fix. And I felt something that surprised me. Not contempt, something closer to sadness, because the offer meant Donna knew what was coming. And instead of addressing it, she'd sent her kid to try to buy my silence for $1,000. Cliff, I said, I appreciate you coming over. But what I know about isn't something I arrived at by accident, and it involves more than you and me. The meeting is going to happen. The information is going to be on the table. I'd suggest your mom talk to an attorney before Saturday. He stood there for a moment, nodded once, left. I went inside and made a detailed written record of the conversation, including the time, his exact words to the best of my memory, and the offer amount. Because an attempt to offer something of value in exchange for dropping a government complaint, code enforcement, can, in the right circumstances, constitute obstruction. I wasn't going to file that anywhere yet, but I had it documented. Tow 14 happened the next morning, and Tow 15 2 days later. Whatever Donna was feeling, she wasn't going to let the truck show weakness. The week before the annual meeting, I got a phone call from a journalist, not the neighborhood blog, a reporter named Brianna from the Raleigh News Weekly, the kind of mid-size investigative outlet that covers local government and HOA issues with genuine rigor. She'd heard about the towing situation through community sources, she said, and wanted to understand the full picture. I talked to her for 40 minutes. I gave her the factual record, the tow log, the code enforcement history, the survey findings. I did not give her the financial documents. Those were for the annual meeting. But I told her that the driveway issue was one piece of a larger concern about HOA governance that would be addressed publicly at the upcoming meeting. Brianna was sharp. She asked the right questions without being sensational about them. She asked me specifically whether I believed Donna's enforcement patterns were discriminatory. I told her, I have data that documents a disparity. I've filed a formal complaint with HUD. They will make that determination. She asked if she could attend the annual meeting. It's an open meeting under North Carolina HOA law. You're welcome. Donna found out about the journalist within 24 hours. I know this because I received an email from the HOA's volunteer attorney, a part-time arrangement the board had, informing me that any attempt to introduce media into HOA proceedings would be considered a violation of the community's privacy standards. The email cited a provision in the HOA governing documents that I'd never seen before. I forwarded it to my own attorney, who pointed out, somewhat dryly, that North Carolina HOA law does not permit a homeowners association to restrict media access to a meeting open to members, and that the cited bylaw provision was almost certainly unenforceable. She offered to send a response on my behalf. I told her to go ahead. The HOA attorney, to his credit, acknowledged the legal point and withdrew the objection within a day. I suspect he'd had a very frank conversation with Donna about picking battles she could actually win. On the Thursday before the Saturday meeting, Warren and I did a dry run. We sat at his kitchen table and walked through the presentation in order. The parking documentation and towing history, the procedural bylaw fight, the selective enforcement pattern and HUD complaint, and then, last, the financial analysis. Roland, the CPA, would present the financial section himself. He'd done this kind of thing before. He'd worked as an expert witness in a municipal fraud case years prior, and he had the particular gift of making financial irregularities comprehensible to a room full of people who didn't want to understand them. Clear, methodical, zero drama. The order was deliberate. We started with the most relatable, concrete issue: the food truck, the driveway, the towing, because that was the thing every neighbor had heard about and could picture. Then we moved to the procedural abuses, which built the case that this was a pattern, not a single incident. Then the selective enforcement data, which made the stakes larger and more serious. And then, at the end, the financial evidence, which was the most damaging, but also the most technical, and would hit hardest after the audience had already concluded, on their own, that something was wrong. It was, Warren noted, a lot like a sermon structure. Hook with what the congregation already suspects. Build the evidence. Land the revelation. I printed 60 copies of the summary packet, 3 pages each, clear headers. Roland's professional stamp on the financial analysis page. The night before the meeting, I sat on my porch with a glass of sweet tea, and for the first time in months, the street out front was just a street. Donna's truck wasn't there. It had been towed the day before for the 16th time, and evidently hadn't been retrieved yet. The oak trees rustled overhead. The October air had the kind of crispness that makes everything feel slightly more consequential than it probably is. Carolyn would have told me I was overthinking it. She would have said, "You already won, Garrett. Just go show up tomorrow and let the truth do the work." She was almost always right about things like that. I went to bed early, slept better than I had in 2 months. The annual meeting started at 10 a.m. on a Saturday in November in the Creekside Pines Community Center. The beige carpet, the folding chairs arranged in rows, the slight mustiness of a room that only gets used once a month. What was different? 61 homeowners showed up. The normal attendance for an annual meeting was around 20. People had heard things. People came prepared. Brianna from the News Weekly was in the back row with a notebook. She'd introduced herself to the board secretary at the door, confirmed she was there as press, and sat down without incident. Several board members had noticed her. Donna noticed her and did not react visibly, which took some kind of iron self-control I have to at least respect on a technical level. Donna opened the meeting with the same practiced efficiency she always used. Crisp, authoritative. She got through the treasurer's report, the landscape contract renewal, the insurance update. She moved through the agenda like she was trying to outpace whatever was coming. I let her. When she reached open floor, homeowner comments, I stood up. My voice was steady. I'd rehearsed this. Not the words exactly, but the energy. Calm, factual, just a man with a lot of paper and a clear conscience. Thank you, Donna. I'd like to use the open comment period to present information relevant to HOA governance that I believe all homeowners deserve to hear. Warren's grandson, 16 years old, sharp kid, was in the back with a wireless clicker, ready to advance a slide presentation projected on the wall behind the board table. I'd put it together in PowerPoint. Nothing fancy. Clean slides. Lots of facts, few adjectives. The first slide, the driveway parking timeline. A simple graphic, truck icon, calendar, tow truck icon. 18 events, dates. Total estimated impound costs, $8,640. Some people in the room audibly reacted. Not everyone had known the full count. The second slide, the camera footage clip. Just 15 seconds, cued and played on the projector. Donna's truck pulling up at 5:47 a.m., the hydraulic brakes hissing in the pre-dawn quiet, the stabilizer jacks grinding down onto the asphalt. It was mundane and somehow devastating. This had been happening in their neighborhood, outside one of their neighbors' houses, before sunrise, for 2 months. Donna tried to interrupt at slide 3, the bylaw procedural record. "This isn't a proper agenda item." "Point of order," Warren said from across the room. Open comment period allows any homeowner to address the board on matters of community concern. The floor belongs to Mr. Holloway. 2 other homeowners echoed, "Point of order." Donna pressed her lips together and went quiet. Slide 4 was the enforcement disparity data, a simple bar chart, average number of violation notices per household, general population of the subdivision versus the 6 households identified in my analysis. The gap was stark. Brianna's pen was moving. I mentioned the HUD complaint by name. I mentioned that it had been formally accepted for investigation. I did not accuse Donna of any specific intent. I let the numbers speak. Then I said, I'd like to turn the floor to Roland Pfeiffer, a certified public accountant who reviewed the HOA's financial records at my request. And Roland stood up. Roland was 64, gray-haired, with the unhurried precision of a man who had been the calmest person in many difficult rooms. He walked through it in 7 minutes flat. The D&P consulting payments, the lack of board authorization, the definition of the conduct under state nonprofit law. He placed the audit memorandum, stamped, professional, 12 pages, on the table in front of the board. The room got very still. Donna stood up. Those payments were for legitimate. Were they authorized at a board meeting? Asked Suzette, the board member who'd supported tabling the bylaw amendment. A beat. A very telling beat. The board was informed, Donna said. The minutes don't reflect that, Roland said, quietly. I reviewed every set of minutes for the relevant period. It didn't explode. It deflated, which is somehow worse. Donna sat down slowly. A murmur ran through the 61 homeowners in folding chairs. The board members looked at each other and then at the table. The HOA vice president called for a motion to place Donna on administrative leave pending an independent financial review. It passed 6-1. Donna's was the single dissenting vote, which, given the circumstances, had a certain poetic quality. As we filed out of the community center an hour later, I passed Donna in the doorway. She looked small in a way she never had before. Not defeated exactly. More like someone who has just discovered that the game they thought they were winning has been a different game entirely. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. Outside, Brianna was already on the phone. Tow number 17 and 18 happened later that same week. Apparently Donna had retrieved the truck and parked it in front of my driveway for the last 2 times, with the mechanical stubbornness of a woman who needed one last act of defiance. I called the tow each time, documented it. 18 tows. One very good story. Here's what happened after. The HOA commissioned an independent financial review. It confirmed Roland's analysis. Donna Platt resigned from the board within 3 weeks of the annual meeting, ahead of a formal removal vote that had been scheduled for December. The D&P consulting payments were declared improper by the reviewing accountant, and Donna ultimately repaid $14,200 to the HOA operating account as part of a settlement. The Wake County DA's office reviewed the referral from the state AG's nonprofit division. As of the most recent update I have, the matter was still under review. I leave that outcome to people with more legal authority than me. The HUD complaint? Accepted for formal investigation. HUD contacted 5 of the 6 households I'd identified. 3 filed their own supporting statements. The process takes time. These things always do, but it's moving. The Delacroix family. I reached out to them directly, carefully, explaining what I'd learned and what had been filed. They were gracious about it. They said they'd felt something was wrong for years but couldn't prove it. They said it helped somehow, just to have it acknowledged. I think about that a lot. Donna's food truck? Donna's Delights closed its mobile operations about 6 weeks after the annual meeting. The truck is listed for sale on a commercial vehicle marketplace. I genuinely hope whoever buys it parks it somewhere more constructive. The new HOA board, elected at a special session in December, with much better turnout than any meeting in recent memory, is chaired by Warren. He didn't want the job. I told him that was exactly why he should take it. He grumbled about it for a week and then accepted. He runs the meetings 10 minutes shorter than scheduled, every time, which alone makes him a historic figure in Creekside Pines. As for me, I finished the kitchen renovation Donna had tried to obstruct. New tile, open shelving, the good quartz countertop that Carolyn had circled in a magazine years ago, and I'd always put off because the timing was never right. Standing at that counter making coffee in the morning, with the light coming in the way it always did, felt like keeping a promise. The new board did something I didn't expect. At the March meeting, they voted to establish the Creekside Pines Neighborhood Equity Fund, a small endowment, seeded initially with the repaid D&P funds, dedicated to supporting an annual community scholarship for a graduating senior from the neighborhood who demonstrates commitment to civic engagement. 10 years from now, some kid who grew up on Blackwood Lane or Elm Court might go to college in part because a food truck parked in the wrong place 18 times. I think Carolyn would have found that very funny. and very fitting. Here's what I want to leave you with, because this story is ultimately about something more than a driveway dispute. Petty authority relies on you believing you're alone. It bets on your exhaustion. It counts on the paperwork being too much, the rules being too confusing, the fight being too expensive. When you refuse those bets, when you get the survey, pull the statutes, file the request, show up to the meeting with the folder, you're not just fighting for your driveway. You're demonstrating that the rules apply to the people who make them too, and that matters. In a neighborhood, in a city, in a country. The truck is gone. The street is quiet. The birds are back. And every morning, I back my truck out of my driveway without any obstruction whatsoever. Best feeling in the world.